The council chamber, stretched wide enough to hold 500 beings from across the galaxy, stood at the human delegation table, her hands folded behind her back as she watched the representative gesture wildly with his crystalline arms. His voice boomed through the translation, devices that every species wore in their ears. The human species lacks the administrative capacity to manage these star systems, the said. His tone carried the same condescending patience one might use with a small child. We have observed their colonies, inefficient, chaotic, hardly the hallmarks of a mature civilization. His face remained perfectly still. She had practiced this expression for years. Behind her, Park shifted slightly in his seat. The military liaison's jaw tightened, but he too remained silent. This was not their first insult. It would not be their last, or so the council believed. The towering being whose species had held the council seat for 6,000 years nodded along with his words. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 species watched the proceedings with varying degrees of interest. Most looked bored. The human question had been on the agenda for months now, and everyone knew how it would end. The council always decided against the humans. It was almost tradition at this point. The systems in question were discovered by human exploration vessels, said, her voice calm and measured. Our people mapped those stars. Our scientists identified the habitable planets. Under council law, discovery grants first rights to colonization. They laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Discovery rights are granted to species capable of proper stewardship. The council must consider the greater good of galactic civilization. Could recite the rest of the speech from memory. She had heard variations of it for 3 centuries. Ever since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and stumbled into this galactic community, they had been treated as the newcomers who did not understand how things worked. Every treaty negotiation ended with humans accepting less than they deserved. Every trade agreement favored the older species. Every territorial dispute was resolved against human interests. The council called it mentorship. The humans had quieter words for it. We move to a vote, they announced. The systems discovered by human vessels in the Sagittarius sector will be administered by the collective. They have demonstrated the organizational sophistication necessary for such a task. The junior diplomat sitting beside pulled up the voting display on her tablet. She did not need to watch the votes come in. She already knew the outcome. 47 votes appeared on the screen. 3 species voted against the measure. The rest voted to strip humanity of their discovery rights and hand everything to the turn 2. The vote is decided. Humanity will cooperate with the collective in the peaceful transition of these territories. Do you accept the council's wisdom? She looked at the representative, who wore an expression of smug satisfaction. She looked at the dozens of alien faces staring back at her, waiting for her to bow her head and accept this latest humiliation with grace. Instead, she reached down and closed her tablet with a soft click. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence, stood up and began gathering his papers, powered down the translation matrix at the human table. Ambassador, the said, and for the first time there was uncertainty in his voice. The vote requires your acknowledgement. Picked up her briefcase. She looked directly at and when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We're done here. She turned and walked toward the exit, fell in step beside her, followed, her arms full of data pads and documents. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floor. Behind them, the chamber erupted. There was shouting something about proper procedure. The called for order, his voice rising above the chaos. Smaller species representatives were on their feet, some calling out questions, others simply staring in shock. Did not look back. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years of quiet meetings with and the military command. 3 years of secret briefings with Earth's government. 3 years of making sure that when humanity walked away from this table, they would never need to come back. The doors of the council chamber closed behind them. The noise cut off suddenly, leaving them in the quiet corridor outside. Let out a long breath. We actually did it. We did it, confirmed. He pulled out his communicator. I'll signal the fleet. Every human ship in council space begins withdrawal immediately. Nodded, she felt lighter than she had in years. Make sure all our people understand. No violence. No confrontation. We simply leave and we do not come back. They walked through the corridors of the council station. Aliens of every description paused to watch them pass. Word was already spreading. The humans had walked out. The humans had actually walked out. In the docking bay, their shuttle waited. The pilot, a woman named Sumi Lee, had the engines already warming. I heard the news, she said as they boarded. The whole station heard. Are we really done with them? We're really done, said. She strapped into her seat and allowed herself a small smile. Take us home. As the shuttle lifted off and angled toward the station exit, looked back one last time at the massive structure that housed the Galactic Council. For 3 centuries, that building had represented humanity's place in the galaxy. A place at the children's table. A place where they were tolerated but not respected. Now it represented nothing but a memory. The shuttle jumped to faster than light speed, and the council station vanished behind them. Ahead lay human space. Ahead lay a future that humanity would build on their own terms. Behind them, the Galactic Council chamber descended into arguments and accusations. The called for emergency sessions. The demanded that the humans be punished for their disrespect, but none of that mattered anymore. The humans were gone, and they were not coming back. Opened her briefcase and pulled out a document she had prepared weeks ago. It was a complete accounting of humanity's true capabilities, their real military strength, their actual technological level, everything they had carefully hidden from the Council for decades. She had left copies of this document in the Council archives before walking out. By now, the Council's analysts would be reading it. By now, they would be realizing their mistake. The humans had not needed the Council's protection. They had not needed the Council's trade networks. They had not needed any of it. They had simply been polite. But politeness had its limits, and the Council had finally found them. The emergency session began 3 hours after the humans departed. The sat in his elevated seat, looking down at the gathered representatives with what he hoped was calm authority. Inside, he felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar. Not quite worry. Not yet. But close. This tantrum will pass, the representative declared. He stood in the center of the chamber, his crystalline body catching the light. I have seen this before. Young species grow frustrated with the wisdom of their elders. They make dramatic gestures. Within a month, they realize their error and return, begging forgiveness. Several heads nodded around the chamber. The representative clicked his mandibles in agreement. The humans depend on Council trade routes. They depend on Council protection. They depend on Council medical technology. They cannot survive alone. The wanted to believe this. He had led the Council for 200 years, and in that time no species had ever truly left. Some had threatened. Some had reduced their participation. But none had walked away completely. The benefits of Council membership were too valuable. The costs of isolation were too high. Yet something nagged at him. The way Ambassador had looked at him before leaving, not with anger, not with frustration, with pity. Perhaps we should examine what we know about human capabilities, suggested a small voice from the back of the chamber. The speaker was a representative from the clans, a species that had always been friendly with humans. Before we assume they will come back. The waved a dismissive hand. We know everything about human capabilities. They submit reports every quarter. Their fleet numbers 23 capital ships, 147 support vessels. Their industrial output is adequate for their population, but nothing impressive. Their technology level is approximately 70% of Council standard. And if those reports were not accurate, they asked. The chamber fell silent. They leaned forward. Are you suggesting the humans lied to the Council? I am suggesting we verify our information before making assumptions, they said carefully. They ordered a full intelligence review. Analysts pulled up every report humanity had submitted over the past 3 centuries. Fleet deployments, industrial capacity, technological assessments. Everything seemed in order. Everything matched the image of a young species struggling to find its place in galactic civilization. Then someone found the documents had left behind. Sealed files, marked for Council eyes only, time-locked to open exactly 1 hour after the human delegation departed. The first analyst to read them thought there had been a mistake. He read them again. Then he called his supervisor. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered around the screen. The numbers did not match, not even close. Human fleet strength was not 23 capital ships. It was 280. The support vessels numbered over 3,000, and they were not 70% of Council technology standard. They were equal to it, in some areas ahead of it. The industrial reports had been carefully doctored. The humans had hidden entire manufacturing complexes, shipyards that the Council did not know existed, research stations that had never appeared on any registration form. For 3 centuries, humanity had been lying. Not small lies, not exaggerations. Systematic, careful, complete deception about every aspect of their civilization's capabilities. They read the reports 3 times. Each time he felt his certainty crumble a little more. "Get me Commander Lee," he ordered, immediately. But Commander Lee was not available. None of the human military officials were available. They had all left Council space. Every human vessel, every human station, every human official who had been operating under Council jurisdiction was gone. The withdrawal was not just political. It was complete. Across the galaxy, human ships were moving. Captain Han commanded the UES Resilience, a heavy cruiser that the Council did not know existed until that morning. His ship had been conducting exercises in deep space for the past 5 years, along with 50 others like it. Now they were returning to human territory, and their route took them through neutral space. A trade convoy spotted the Resilience and sent an inspection request. Under Council law, all vessels in neutral space could be inspected to ensure compliance with safety and weapons regulations. It was standard procedure. Every species accepted it. Its response was brief and direct. "We do not recognize Council authority. Proceed with your journey and we will proceed with ours." The convoy commander did not know how to respond. He had never heard such a statement, never imagined hearing it. He consulted his regulations manual, but there was no entry for what to do when someone simply refused to acknowledge Council authority. He let the human ship pass. On Earth, Nam stood before the Planetary Assembly and presented her report. She was an economist, and she had spent 15 years building the framework that would allow humanity to survive without the Council. "We have established private trade agreements with 41 species," she explained. "These agreements bypass Council oversight completely. We trade directly, on terms that benefit both parties. Many of these species are too small to have Council representation, so the Council does not even know these agreements exist." She pulled up a galactic map. Lines crisscrossed the display, showing trade routes that connected human worlds to dozens of minor civilizations. "The Council believed we depended on their trade network. In reality, we built our own. We have been building it for decades." The Assembly members absorbed this information in silence. Finally, one asked the question on everyone's mind. "Why did we hide all this? Why not show the Council our real strength?" Smiled, "Because strong species get treated differently than weak ones. The Council sees strong species as threats. They limit them. regulate them, watch them constantly. We preferred to appear weak while we grew strong in private. Back at the council station, the was beginning to understand this strategy, and he was beginning to understand what it meant. The representative demanded action. We must sanction the humans, blockade their space, force them to return and accept proper oversight. With what authority? The representative asked. They have withdrawn from the council. Our laws no longer apply to them. Then we make an example of them, they insisted. We show the galaxy what happens to species who reject council wisdom. The called for a vote on sanctions, economic restrictions, travel bans, trade embargoes, everything the council could impose to punish humanity for their defiance. The vote failed. 23 species voted for sanctions, 24 voted against. They stared at the results. This is impossible. Who would vote against council unity? The answer became clear over the following days. Species that had their own grievances with the council. Species that had watched humans accept insult after insult and wondered if they should do the same. Species that secretly admired what humanity had done. The clans announced they were downgrading their council membership to observer status. They would no longer commit military forces to council operations. They would no longer submit to council economic oversight. They would remain friendly, they said, but they would no longer be subordinate. The sovereign rings declared complete neutrality. They opened their trade lanes to all vessels, including human ones. The council protested, but the sovereign rings simply stopped responding to messages. On the third day after the humans walked out, made her first public statement. It was broadcast on every major communications network, reaching billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Humanity seeks no conflict with the council, she said. Her image appeared on screens everywhere, calm and professional. We simply choose to determine our own future. We will continue to trade with any species willing to deal with us fairly. We will continue to defend ourselves against any threat. And we will continue to respect the sovereignty of all civilizations. But we will no longer accept being treated as children who need supervision. The message was clear. The humans were not angry. They were not seeking revenge. They had simply stopped caring what the council thought. And that was far more dangerous than any threat could have been. The collective made their move 2 weeks after the humans. Their fleet commander, a veteran of a dozen minor conflicts, led 37 warships into the disputed systems. The systems that the council had awarded them. The systems that human explorers had discovered. They expected no resistance. Why would there be? The council had granted them legal authority. The humans had no right to be there. This would be a simple occupation. They would plant their flags, establish their colonies, and that would be the end of it. Fleet Admiral Shin had anticipated this moment for months. She sat in the command center of the UES Indomitable, watching the fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. Around her ship, 73 human vessels waited in perfect formation. Ships the had not known existed. Ships the council had not known existed. "Open a channel," said calmly. The commander appeared on the. His confusion was visible even across species barriers. "This system is under authority by council decree. You are trespassing." "This system was discovered by human explorers," replied. "It is human territory. You are the ones trespassing." "The council has ruled." "We do not recognize council authority," interrupted. "Leave this system immediately, or we will remove you by force." The commander looked at the ships surrounding his fleet. He had studied human military capabilities from the council reports. According to those reports, the entire human fleet barely numbered 200 ships. Yet here were 73 vessels just in this one system, all of them larger and more heavily armed than the reports had indicated. He made a quick calculation. His orders from the high command were clear: take the systems, establish control, show the galaxy that the council's authority still mattered. but his orders had been based on the assumption that the humans would not fight, or if they did fight, they would be easily defeated. Looking at the human fleet, he revised that assumption. "We will withdraw and consult with our government," he said finally. "Smart choice," said. The fleet turned and jumped away. The moment they were gone, allowed herself a small smile. "Send the tactical data to Earth. Let them know exactly what they saw." The report reached the Council 3 hours later. The commander had been thorough. Ship classifications, weapon configurations, shield technology, electronic warfare capabilities, every detail his sensors had captured. The Council analysts read the report in growing horror. These were not the primitive human vessels they had imagined. These were warships that matched or exceeded Council military standards. And if the humans had 73 such ships in one system, how many more did they have scattered across their territory? They called another emergency session. This time the chamber was not filled with smug certainty. This time beings spoke in worried whispers. The humans were not weak. The humans had never been weak. They had simply pretended to be. "We must organize a response," the representative insisted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "A coalition fleet. Show the humans that the Council still has power." "A coalition fleet to do what?" asked the representative. "Invade human space, force them to rejoin the Council, and if they defend themselves, do we go to war? Against an enemy whose true strength we are only beginning to understand." They had no answer. Going to war with humanity would require the support of dozens of species. It would require ships, soldiers, resources. It would require everyone to agree that bringing the humans back was worth the cost. He called for a vote. The measure failed before it even reached the floor. Too many species refused to commit their military forces. Too many governments had seen the tactical report and decided that fighting humans was not in their interest. Without unanimous support, the Council had no way to enforce its will, and that terrifying realization settled over the chamber like a cold fog. On the frontier world of New Pyongyang, Governor Bay was dealing with a different kind of chaos. Her office was filled with requests for meetings, representatives from 16 different species, all asking for the same thing. They wanted to establish direct diplomatic relations with humanity. "The Council has represented our interests for 300 years, one representative explained. He was from a small species called the, whose had barely 10 million inhabitants. But the Council does not listen to small voices. We watched how they treated you, and we realized they treat us the same way. We want to deal with you directly." Approved every request. Within a week, New Pyongyang had become an unofficial diplomatic hub. Species that had never spoken directly to each other were meeting in her conference rooms, establishing their own agreements, building their own networks. All of it outside Council supervision. The cascade was accelerating. Every day brought news of another species reducing their Council participation. The sovereign rings were not alone anymore. They announced their withdrawal. The Assembly downgraded to observer status. The Commonwealth declared they would no longer pay Council dues until reforms were implemented. The Council's power had always rested on a simple principle. Everyone agreed to follow Council decisions. It was voluntary cooperation enforced by social pressure and economic incentive. But if species stopped caring about Council approval, if they could survive and thrive outside the Council's framework, then what was left? O had written a paper about this 5 years ago. She was a strategic analyst for Earth's government, and her work had been classified at the highest level. Now she stood before the unified government and explained what was happening. "The Council is not a government," she said. "It has no army of its own. It has no tax authority. It cannot force anyone to do anything. Its power comes from collective agreement. Every species agrees to follow Council decisions because they believe everyone else will do the same. But once that agreement breaks down, Once species realize they can ignore the council without consequences, the entire structure becomes meaningless. "So we destroyed the council by walking away?" someone asked. "We showed everyone else that walking away was possible," corrected. "We showed them that the council's authority is imaginary. It only exists because everyone pretends it does. Stop pretending and it vanishes." Back on the council station, there was learning this lesson in the hardest way possible. He sat in his office, reading reports of one departure after another. The council was not collapsing dramatically. It was simply becoming irrelevant. Species were not declaring war on the council. They were just ignoring it. Across the galaxy, Science Advisor was making things worse for the council's prestige. He stood before a gathering of scientists from 30 different species and presented his research. Research that solved a problem the council's best minds had declared impossible. "We call it the navigation solution," explained. "It allows vessels to travel through the deeper layers of subspace. The effect is multiplicative. Ships using this technology can cross distances 3 times faster than current faster-than-light drives." The scientists in the audience sat in stunned silence. Then someone from the contingent stood up. "This is impossible. The Council Research Directorate spent 5,000 years studying this problem. We concluded it could not be solved." "You concluded it could not be solved with your approach," said politely. "We took a different approach." The implications rippled through the scientific community within days. Humanity had not just matched Council technology. They had surpassed it. And if they could surpass it in one area, what else had they achieved while everyone assumed they were backwards newcomers? The Council called for an emergency technology summit. They wanted to examine human research. They wanted to verify these claims. They wanted some way to reassert their position as the galaxy's technological leaders. The humans declined to attend. They were busy, explained in a polite message, establishing their own research partnerships with interested species. Any civilization that wanted to collaborate with human scientists was welcome to reach out directly. 37 species reached out within the first week. They finally understood what was happening. The Council was not being destroyed. It was being replaced. Humanity was building new networks, new alliances, new ways for species to cooperate without Council oversight. And they were doing it with everyone who had ever felt overlooked or dismissed by the old system. It was brilliant. It was devastating. And there was nothing the Council could do to stop it. 6 months after humanity walked out, the Galactic Council chamber looked like a shadow of its former self. They gazed out at the assembled representatives and counted the empty seats. 43 species had withdrawn completely. Another 62 had downgraded to observer status, which meant they attended sessions but refused to commit resources or follow Council directives. The representative still attended every session, but his crystalline body seemed duller now, less brilliant. He no longer made grand speeches about galactic civilization. Mostly he sat in silence, watching the old order crumble around him. "We must discuss the situation in the sector," they said, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "The Commonwealth and the Collective have both claimed the same systems. Without Council mediation, this could lead to open warfare." "The Council no longer has authority in that region," someone pointed out. "Both species have withdrawn from our jurisdiction. What exactly can we do?" They had no answer. The Council's peacekeeping forces had been disbanded. Too many species had withdrawn their military contributions. The famous Council fleet, once the largest military force in the galaxy, now numbered fewer than 300 ships, and most of those were old, outdated vessels that no one wanted anymore. Meanwhile, conflicts that the Council had suppressed for centuries were erupting across known space, not because anyone was encouraging violence, simply because the Council was no longer there to stop it. The old trade routes that the Council had guaranteed were now contested territory. The border agreements that the Council had enforced were being renegotiated or ignored entirely. The galaxy was restructuring itself, and the Council was not part of that restructure. In desperation, the proposed one final attempt to restore Council authority. "We organize a coalition fleet," he said, "not to attack the humans, but to restore order to human space. We bring them back into the galactic community by force." The proposal drew bitter laughter from several representatives. "With what ships?" someone asked. "With what authority? And even if we could assemble such a fleet, do you truly believe the humans would submit?" They did not answer. He knew the truth. Everyone knew the truth. The tactical reports had been shared widely. Every military analyst in the galaxy had studied them. The consensus was clear. Fighting humanity would be expensive, bloody, and probably futile. But the was desperate. His species had built their power on Council authority. Without the Council, they were just another civilization among hundreds. So he pushed forward with the plan, trying to assemble support from anyone willing to listen. Received word of this coalition effort within hours. Human intelligence networks had improved dramatically since the withdrawal. They had informants, friends, and allies scattered across dozens of species. Information flowed freely now that everyone was talking to everyone else outside official channels. She composed a response carefully. She wanted it to be public, broadcast to every inhabited system. She wanted everyone to hear humanity's position clearly. "We have received word of attempts to organize military action against human territory," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Let me be clear. Any fleet that enters human-controlled space with hostile intent will be treated as an act of war. We will defend ourselves with all available force. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not be intimidated or coerced. We recommend that cooler heads prevail." The message was broadcast on every major network, and the effect was immediate. Species that had been considering joining this coalition suddenly reconsidered. The humans were not threatening conquest. They were not demanding submission. They were simply stating they would defend themselves. And everyone remembered the fleet's retreat. Everyone had seen the tactical data. Fighting humans was possible, certainly, but it would not be easy. And for what? To force them back into a council that barely functioned anymore. The coalition never formed. They sat alone in the council chamber, his grand plan crumbling to dust. On the frontier, things were very different. Governor Bay stood at the landing pad of New Pyongyang's main spaceport, welcoming yet another diplomatic delegation. This one was from the Assembly, a mid-sized civilization that had just withdrawn from the Council. "We come seeking partnership," the ambassador said. "Not domination, not supervision, partnership between equals." Smiled, she had heard similar words from dozens of delegations over the past months. "That is exactly what we offer: equal treaties, mutual respect, fair trade." The negotiations took 3 days. In the end, humanity and the Assembly signed a comprehensive agreement covering trade, defense, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation. It was not a council-style agreement where one species dictated terms to another. It was a genuine partnership where both sides benefited. News of the treaty spread quickly. Other species took note. If they could negotiate fair terms with humanity, why not them? Within weeks was scheduling meetings months in advance. New Pyongyang was becoming what the council station used to be, a hub of galactic diplomacy. Except here, small species had the same voice as large ones. Here, nobody was dismissed as too young or too primitive. Captain Han was experiencing a different kind of change. His ship, the UES Resilience, now patrolled what used to be Council-exclusive trade lanes. But the lanes were not exclusive anymore. They were open to anyone who wanted to use them, and the humans had taken on the job of keeping them safe. A distress call came in from a cargo vessel. Pirates had attacked them in what used to be Council-protected space, but the Council peacekeepers were long gone. The crew expected no help. They were preparing to abandon ship. Then the Resilience arrived. Crew drove off the pirates and escorted the cargo vessel to safety. The captain could not believe it. "You are not obligated to help us," he said. "We have no treaty with humanity. We cannot pay you." "We do not need payment," replied. "We patrol these lanes. We protect ships that use them. All ships. That is what civilized beings do." The story spread through trade networks faster than any official announcement could travel. Human ships were protecting everyone, not just human vessels, not just allied species. Everyone. They asked nothing in return except that travelers respect each other and trade fairly. Piracy dropped 70% in human-patrolled space within 2 months, and species that had never had any contact with humans began asking if their ships could use those safe routes. Admiral Shin was busy signing defense pacts. The clans were first, then the sovereign rings, then 24 smaller species who had never qualified for Council military protection. The agreements were simple. If you are attacked, we will help defend you. If we are attacked, you help defend us. No species was required to fight in wars of conquest, only defense. It was a collective security network built on cooperation, not domination, and it worked. When a hostile force tried to raid a colony world, 3 human ships and 5 vessels responded within hours. The raiders fled without engaging. They had expected an easy target. They found a defended ally. On Earth, Director O briefed the unified government on the state of galactic affairs. Her projections had been accurate. The power vacuum left by the Council's collapse was being filled, but not by chaos and war. It was being filled by new networks of cooperation. "The transition will take decades to complete," she explained. "Some regions will see conflict as old grievances resurface. Some species will struggle with their newfound independence, but the overall trajectory is clear. The galaxy is moving toward a more equitable system." "And what about the Council?" someone asked. "Do they still pose a threat?" Shook her head. "The Council poses no threat. They barely exist anymore. They still hold sessions, but attendance is minimal. Most species have either withdrawn or stopped paying attention. The Council has become what it always was beneath the ceremony, a voluntary organization with no real power." "So we won," someone said. "We did not win," corrected gently. "We simply stopped playing their game, and then we built a better one." They received one final request from his advisors. They wanted to send a delegation to Earth, not to demand anything, not to threaten, simply to talk, to see if there was any way to salvage something from the ruins of Council authority. The humans agreed to meet them, received the delegation personally in the Terran Assembly Hall on Mars. They himself led the group, along with representatives from the few species still loyal to the Council. "We come seeking dialogue," they said. His voice was quiet, humble even. "The Council has made mistakes. Perhaps we can find a way to reform, to rebuild." Listened politely. Then she spoke words that they would remember for the rest of his long life. "The Council is welcome to continue existing, if your members choose to maintain it. But understand this clearly. Humanity will never again accept artificial hierarchies. We will never again accept inherited superiority. We will build partnerships with any species willing to meet us as equals. We will defend ourselves and our allies against any aggression. And we will never again beg for respect we have already earned." She paused, letting the words sink in. If the Council wants to reform, truly reform, into an organization that treats all species fairly regardless of age or size, we would welcome that. But we will not wait for it. We will not depend on it. We have moved forward. The galaxy has moved forward. You can join us in building something better, or you can cling to the past. That choice is yours. They left Earth without the concessions he had hoped for. As his ship departed, he looked back at the blue planet below and finally accepted what he had been denying for months. The age of the Galactic Council had ended. 30 years had passed since humanity walked out of the Galactic Council chamber. Professor Park stood before his class at New Seoul University, preparing to teach the lecture he had given hundreds of times. The title appeared on the screen behind him: The Quiet Revolution: How Humanity Changed the Galaxy. His students, young humans who had never known the old council system, looked up with interest. To them, the current state of galactic civilization was normal. They had grown up in a galaxy where species dealt with each other directly, where size and age did not determine influence, where respect was earned rather than inherited. Before we discuss the current galactic order began, we must understand what came before. 30 years ago, the Galactic Council controlled almost every aspect of interstellar civilization. They determined trade routes. They settled disputes. They decided which species were worthy of respect and which needed guidance. He pulled up an image of the old council chamber. Empty seats were clearly visible. This photograph was taken 1 year after humanity. Notice how many species are absent. The council continued to hold sessions, but fewer and fewer representatives attended, not because they hated the council, but because it had become irrelevant. A student raised her hand. "Professor, did the humans destroy the council?" Smiled, it was the question everyone asked. No, we simply stopped pretending it mattered, and once we stopped, everyone else realized they could stop too. The council's authority was never real. It was a collective agreement. When the agreement ended, so did the authority. He changed the display to show a map of current galactic civilization. Instead of the old council structure with its clear hierarchy, the map showed hundreds of interconnected networks. Trade agreements, defense pacts, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations. All of it flowing between species without any central authority. This is what replaced the council, explained. Not another hierarchy, not another organization that claims to speak for everyone. Instead, we have direct relationships between civilizations. The clans trade with humanity, humanity collaborates with they have defense agreements with the sovereign rings, and so on. It looks chaotic, but it is actually more stable than the old system. Why more stable? Another student asked. Because no single point of failure exists, replied. Under the council, if the council failed, everything collapsed. Now, if one relationship fails, hundreds of others continue. The system is resilient because it is distributed. He pulled up statistics that showed the transformation clearly. Galactic trade had increased 40% in 30 years. Conflicts between species had decreased by half. Scientific advancement had accelerated as researchers from different civilizations collaborated freely without council oversight. Even the regions that had seen violence immediately after the council's collapse had mostly stabilized. Not everyone benefited equally from this change, noted. Species that had held power under the old system, like the lost their special status. They are still advanced civilizations, but they are no longer able to dictate terms to others. For them, this new galaxy is less comfortable. On the old council station, now mostly abandoned, the successor still maintained a small office. The council technically still existed. A dozen species maintained nominal membership, mostly out of tradition or unwillingness to formally dissolve an institution that had lasted thousands of years. But it held no real power. Its sessions were sparsely attended. Its decisions were ignored by most of the galaxy. The current, a quiet being who understood that his role was ceremonial at best, occasionally received visitors. Today, a young diplomat came to ask about the old days. What was it like, the young asked, when the council actually mattered? The thought for a long moment. It felt permanent. We believed we were guiding galactic civilization. We believed smaller species needed our wisdom. We were wrong, but we did not know we were wrong. And then the humans showed us. Do you hate them for it? No, they said. They did not destroy us out of malice. They simply refused to continue accepting disrespect. If we had treated them fairly, if we had treated all species fairly, they would have had no reason to leave. The Council destroyed itself. The humans just made it obvious. Meanwhile, in the Terran Assembly Hall on Mars, Ambassador was attending her last session before retirement. She was 78 years old now, and she had spent the last 3 decades helping to build the new galactic order. She had negotiated hundreds of treaties. She had mediated dozens of disputes. She had watched the galaxy transform from a hierarchical system into something more free. A delegation from a newly spacefaring species arrived for their first contact with humanity. They were nervous, uncertain. Their entire planet had achieved faster than light travel just 5 years ago, and they were still learning how galactic civilization worked. "We were told we must apply to the Galactic Council for membership," their leader said, "but we cannot find any information about how to apply." Smiled. "The Council barely exists anymore. You do not need their permission to join galactic civilization. You are already part of it simply by being here." "But how do we trade? How do we establish diplomatic relations? How do we know what rules to follow?" "You trade by finding species that want what you offer and offering what they want. You establish diplomatic relations by talking to other civilizations directly. As for rules, there are some common standards for safety and communication, but mostly you are free to make your own agreements with whoever you choose." The new species looked confused. "But who is in charge?" "No one is in charge," explained. "That is the point. We work together as equals. If you want to trade with the clans, you contact them directly. If you want to collaborate with human scientists, you contact us. If you need help defending your territory, you can seek defense pacts with species willing to ally with you. There is no central authority telling everyone what to do." The delegation left looking uncertain but hopeful, watched them go and felt satisfied. This was the galaxy she had helped create. A galaxy where a tiny species from a small planet could participate on equal terms with civilizations millions of years old. Captain Han, now an admiral commanding an entire patrol fleet, was dealing with a different aspect of the new order. A conflict had broken out between 2 minor species over a disputed asteroid belt. Under the old council, this would have been brought before them for judgment. Now, there was no to appeal to. Instead, a commander jointly offered to mediate, not as authorities imposing judgment, but as neutral parties trying to find a solution both sides could accept. It took 2 weeks of negotiations, but eventually the species agreed to share the asteroid belt, dividing it into zones that each could mine. "Why did you help us?" one of the species asked afterward. "You gain nothing from our agreement." "We gain stability," replied. "We gain neighbors who are not at war with each other. We gain a reputation as honest mediators, which other species will remember when they need help. The galaxy works better when everyone cooperates." This had become the standard approach to galactic problems. Instead of waiting for a central authority to impose solutions, species worked together to find answers. Sometimes it was messy. Sometimes it took longer than it would have under the Council's system. But the solutions were more likely to last because both sides had agreed to them voluntarily. Director O, now retired but still consulted regularly by Earth's government, gave an interview to a historical documentary about the transformation of galactic civilization. "The most important thing to understand," she said, "is that we did not plan to transform the galaxy. We only planned to stop accepting disrespect. Everything else followed naturally from that decision." "Do you regret how much changed?" the interviewer asked. Shook her head. The old system was built on inequality. It survived by making species believe they needed council approval to matter. Once that belief was shattered, the entire structure collapsed. Could we have done it differently? Perhaps. Could we have stayed in the council and tried to reform it from within? We tried that for 3 centuries. It did not work. Sometimes the only way forward is to walk away and build something new. On Earth, in the government archives, they still kept the original document that had left for the Council, the complete accounting of humanity's true capabilities. Historians studied it as the moment when everything changed, not the walkout itself, but the revelation that humanity had been systematically hiding their strength for generations. Some called it deception, others called it survival strategy. Herself, in her memoirs, called it patience. "We knew we could not change the Council by confronting them directly," she wrote. "They were too invested in their own superiority. So we built our strength quietly, made alliances privately, and waited for the right moment. When we finally walked away, we did not do it from weakness. We did it from strength, and that made all the difference." Professor concluded his lecture with a question for his students. Was the transformation of galactic civilization inevitable? Would it have happened without humanity's actions? The class discussed it for several minutes. Some argued that the Council was already weakening, that humanity just accelerated an existing process. Others believed the Council would have lasted longer without the shock of humanity's departure. Let them debate, then offered his own view. "I believe the transformation was inevitable, but its timing was not. Unjust systems eventually collapse, but they can last a very long time if no one challenges them. Humanity challenged the system. We showed others that walking away was possible. We proved that respect must be earned, not inherited. And most importantly, we demonstrated that civilization can exist without hierarchy." He looked at his young students, citizens of a galaxy they had helped reshape. "The galaxy you live in is not perfect. There are still conflicts, there are still injustices, but it is more free than it was 30 years ago, more fair, more open to new voices. That is humanity's legacy. Not destruction but transformation, not conquest but liberation." As the class ended and students filed out, remained behind, looking at the image of the old council chamber still displayed on the screen. Empty seats in a grand hall, a monument to power that no longer existed. The humans had walked away, and the galaxy had followed them toward something better. The Galactic Council still existed, technically, but it was a ghost, a memory of a time when age and size determined respect. The future belonged to those willing to meet each other as equals, to build relationships based on mutual benefit rather than inherited authority. Humanity had not destroyed the old order through force. They had destroyed it through absence, by refusing to participate, by building alternatives, by showing everyone else that the emperor had no clothes. And 30 years later, almost no one wanted the emperor back.